Hello and welcome to this episode of The Model Railway Photographer. And without further ado, let's crack on with this episode's
topic on track.
So this is the one you've probably all been waiting for. Let's have a look at model railway photography. First, I thought I'd start by looking at my history with photography. So let's dive into my history with photography just briefly. So it started around about 5 years ago. I got a drone for Christmas and I got really inspired. I did a course on color grading so I could make the videos look nice and professional. I went around, made some videos. One thing led to another and I started getting into the photography element of it. Went around the UK to some absolutely beautiful places, my favourite being the northwest of Scotland. I got some lovely images up there, which you're seeing right now. I do hope you approve of those. And then I thought, you know what? I wonder if I can combine this skill with my new interest, model railways. So I started building my original railway back in early 2024. And then it got to around about September, October time, and I noticed that Hornby were running a competition called Model Shot of the Year. I thought, you know what, let's give this a go. What's the worst that could happen? And a few months went by, and eventually one day I got an email saying that I'd actually won the whole thing. So you can see I got this beautiful plinth with a plaque on it and the W1 Hush Hush with the smoke generator. I won a bit of money, Hornby reward points, so I thought I'd get one of those because they do look nice. So yeah, here it is, sitting next to me, pride of place, Hornby Model Shot of the Year 2024 winner. So I thought, well, that was wonderful. I then got inspired to try something quite adventurous. We had Sir Nigel Gresley down at the Bluebell Railway. So I thought, I wonder if there's a unique image perhaps I can take using my drone of Sir Nigel Gresley. So I put a little bit of something together and I thought, you know what, there's a particular YouTuber who might be interested in this photograph. So I sat down one evening to watch a live stream and well, this is what happened.
And then up next, I think we have the finest bit of photography, and my printer's not really done it justice. I might have to show this in another stream properly on the screen, because yeah, I think this is the greatest photo. I don't mean any sort of offence to anybody else that's sent in a photo before, because they're all wonderful, but this one is something else. It's by David B, and it is just incredible. So this was taken from a drone. Try and get it focused, and just look at that. And like I say, my printer has not done this justice at all. The actual photo was absolutely stunning, and yeah, everything's blurred, everything's motion blurred except for the loco, which is in perfect focus. I don't know whether that's an effect or not. It might have been edited, I don't know, but regardless, the final product is exquisite. It is absolutely gorgeous.
So yeah, very, very kind words from Sam there. I'm sure I can look forward to the litigation for using some of his footage. No, I only jest. I'm sure he won't mind me using that for a minute or so. So here's the original image popping up on the screen there for you to enjoy. The motion blur I captured by reducing the shutter speed using what's known as an ND filter. So no clever editing tricks or anything. I just matched the speed of the drone to the loco and it came out beautifully. Anyway, enough of me blowing smoke up my own jacksie. You want to know how to photograph your model railway. So the first thing I thought I'd talk about is why would you want to learn to photograph your model railway? Well, the simple explanation for that is unless you've got an exhibition layout, and let's face it, most of us don't, photography is really the only way that we can share our layouts with the rest of the world. And if you've put hundreds upon hundreds of hours into creating something, well, you want to show it off to its best, don't you? So that's why it's worth taking the time to learn how to photograph your layout properly, so you can then share it with the world and do it justice. Also, take for example things like the Pico 200 competition where you had to build the diorama. You could have made the best diorama by a country mile, but if you took bad photos, well, you're probably not going to win. So that's why it's worth taking the time to learn to photograph your layout properly. Right, so how do we actually go about doing it? Well, the first part is to choose one of your favorite spots on your layout. You know, we've all got those areas that just turned out as your mind's eye expected. You look down to the level of the trains and you just feel immersed in the world. Well, that's probably the best spot to choose, certainly to begin with. I realise I haven't got a photo of the area where I'm sat on the station holding my little lad. So I thought, you know what, that's somewhere I'd be interested in taking a photo. So, once you've chosen your spot, what next? Well, of course you need a locomotive and some rolling stock. So choose something that you think fits the scene, something that, I don't know, piques your interest, something you're in the mood for at the time. It doesn't really matter, just as long as you think it looks good. The next most important element is to get the lighting right. It's no good taking a photo in a dark and dingy space because it doesn't matter what you do, it's just not going to look right. So make sure you've got the big light on in your room, use an old lamp. I'm lucky, I've got studio lights, so it's great. I can really finely adjust the lighting, get it exactly how I want, but you don't need anything that fancy. Just make sure that the area is well lit. Once you've done that, the next most important thing to talk about is the actual camera that you're using. It's really important with this style of photography that you use a camera with what's known as a macro lens. This means that you can get up close to objects and still have a sharp focus. If you don't use a camera with a macro lens, then you're just going to end up with a blurry mess. What sort of cameras could you use? Well, I've been using my iPhone, to be honest. It's an iPhone 15 Pro Max. It has a macro camera, so it works. In this edit, I actually used my DJI Osmo Pocket 4. It's the first time I've used it, but again, it has a macro mode. And the next most important thing, the next most important setting, and I can't stress this enough, on the camera is to shoot in what's called RAW. Everyone's heard of a JPEG. That's the standard file that your camera produces. It takes a photo from the sensor and the JPEG puts some color into it. That isn't going to work in this instance. If we want to make a really professional, nice looking photo, we need a RAW file. This basically is a file that when you look at it, comes out quite flat, quite grey, but the idea is it preserves a lot of the details in the highlights and the shadows. And using software, you can manipulate those details to your heart's extent to make something you really want to see. Now, what software do you use? There's all sorts, but my favourite is Luminar Neo. So, without further ado, let's dive into Luminar Neo and see what I come up with. Hello and welcome to Luminar Neo, which is my photo editor of choice when I'm doing my photo editing. You can use anything you want, but this, as I say, is the one I use. It's a really powerful tool. Like anything, it takes a bit of getting used to. There's a channel called Anthony Turnham. He's wonderful at explaining the ins and outs of Luminar Neo. So I'll put a link to his channel in the description below if you want to check it out, and you can get really in depth and learn what all the tools are. As I say, I'm going to be explaining what I'm doing as I'm doing it, and you can follow along. So here we are. This is the photo I've taken. I couldn't get a composition I liked from where me and my little lad were standing, so I chose to go a bit further back, and then I've got us right here checking out this class 31, which is the loco I chose. I think it's got quite an interesting face, quite a few details, weathering as well, so I think that should work. So let's get into our edits. So we've got a raw photo and not a JPEG. So a raw photo isn't going to have quite the color that a JPEG would have. And now this is the first time I'm going to be editing a photo using the DJI Osmo Pocket 4. I've used my iPhone beforehand, and this does seem to have a little bit more color, surprisingly, than the profile that would come out of the iPhone. So let's see what we can do with it. Exposure, well, I think we mostly know what that does. Darken and lighten. I think it's pretty much spot on actually here, so we'll leave that as is. Highlights, again, they look pretty good to me. You can see from the histogram up here, we've got the darks and the lights. Up here, there's quite a good spread already. So really, to be perfectly honest, it doesn't need that much adjustment. Again, with the shadows, it's already pretty good. We'll put some shadows in just to increase the contrast slightly. Blacks and whites, I don't bother with these sliders. It's much better to use the curves. In Luminar, you can press the J key, and that shows where you've got pure white and pure black. So you can be certain that you're working with a full spectrum from lights to darks, which you can see we are here. So don't really need to adjust that. We can play around with the curve a bit just to see if we like anything that that's doing. I think we're just clipping a little bit here. So there we're getting our white point. Contrast has just been reduced a little bit. Yeah, I think we were pretty good where we were. I don't mind clipping a little just to get a little bit more contrast in there. So you can see we've got some clipping in the top here and at the bottom with the whites and the blacks. But I quite like the overall image that that's giving us. So we'll press the J key again and get rid of the warnings. So that's that done. Color, there's already, as I say, quite a lot of color in this image already. Now the vibrant slider talks to the quieter colors in the image, but again, I don't really think it needs much doing. I might tweak it just a little bit, which is oversaturating the green in the background here, but we can deal with that later on. Saturation just talks to everything, as you can see, just absolutely, yeah, makes everything scream. So put that back to normal. You can reset these sliders just by double clicking on the circles there, but I'm quite happy with the initial image we've got here. Sharpness and noise reduction we don't really need. We'll put on the chromatic abrasions and the auto defringe. Distortion corrections can just crop in and cause chaos. So basically the develop here, raw, is just getting the basics, the fundamental layer of your image correct. It's like if you're doing modeling, you start with a solid base, a solid foundation, and then you add your layers onto that. So by going through develop raw, that's what we've just established, a nice solid layer in which to then work upon. So noiseless raw, we can use that. We'll click low, middle and high is too much. That just gets rid of any digital noise that's in the photo, so you end up with a nice clear image. And now we can go back into our tools section. We will go through our workflow. What's quite useful is the super sharp as well, just to make sure everything is as you want it, so there's no shakiness or slight blurring around the edges where the lens might have been moving slightly as you were taking your photo. Again, low works really well with this. Middle and high can just make it a little bit too sharp, whereas this just makes things crisp. So let the software do its thing, and there we go. We'll zoom back out again. So now we've got a really solid base with which to work. Now, when it comes to our model photography, we want to make the viewer of the photo feel immersed in our world. So basically we want to try and get rid of these sorts of elements that we've got in this top right hand corner here, where your eye would get distracted and the immersion is lost. So how can we go about doing that? Well, what I like to do is use the clone tool. Now what this does is you can select with this little circle here another part of your image from which to effectively copy and paste into another section. So you can see as we move across here, we're copying that skyline into this part of the image. Now I think if we just reselect here, because we're just clipping some of the overhead wire, if we come down here we can just get rid of that section of lamppost, just come across there. Right, now it looks a little bit clunky in the top right hand corner at the moment, but fundamentally we've made it look like there's a bit of extra sky going on in the top right hand corner there, so we could just go with that and that doesn't actually look too bad. However, we can try and do a little bit better than that. So if we go into our sky tool, we can actually select different skies and have a look at something that might work well for this image. So if you have a look, that has now replaced the default sky with something a little bit more realistic, and it also helps with the lighting as well. The software's clever enough to change that, so we can try a couple of different skies, just let it think it through, see what works. Not too bad. I think one with fluffy clouds is definitely the way to go. Let's have a look at this one. That's quite subtle, it doesn't detract too much from the eye, so that one's not too bad. I mean, you can do all sorts of things. You can put sunset things on, which as you can see doesn't really work with this image. You can then play around with the light just to make it look right, sort of a more dingy day, but I think I want something a little bit more bright, a little bit more poppy than that. So I do quite like this one, I have to be honest. I think that's quite subtle. I don't really want it to be detracting away too much from our image. So once we're happy with a sky, you can change things. You've got horizon position, so you can see you can move it up and down. So you might want to make it look a little bit more like it blends in. Let's see, we've got these sort of white bits here, so I think that hides that element, which we could do something about with our clone tool, but I think it would be better to actually just work with it with what we've got, because it can start to get a little bit more tricky. Close gaps, probably looking better around about 5, I'd say. Fixed detail, so move that slider up. As you can see around things like the tree here, that's just gonna really get those details right, just so it closes up any slight issues, so it looks a little bit more natural than it otherwise would. But as you can see, if we go before and after, we had this, which isn't too bad, but after we add the sky in, it just makes it look that little bit more realistic, adds in lighting effect, and really can be a very powerful tool for that immersion that we're looking to get. Right, next I like to try and clean up the image, try and do something about any little details I don't really like the look of. Now the only thing I can see here that's grabbing my attention is this little white square coming in from the right hand side of the image. So if we go into our erase tool, I will just select that, click erase, and we'll let it think about it and see what it comes up with. Otherwise, if we don't like what we're seeing, we can always just use our clone tool, just see if we can get rid of that little bit of the bridge there. No, don't really like that. Let's undo that, and we'll undo the original as well, because I think we can do a better job with our clone tool. So we always want to be selecting close to where we're going to be using it, just to make the lighting look more natural. And as you can see, just by painting this over, there we go. So if we go before and after, you can see we've now got rid of that horrible white square that was distracting us in the right hand side of the image. It's all about just that immersion and trying to make your viewer believe they're seeing a real locomotive and a real photo as much as possible, as well as adding in some artistic elements. So I think that's it for our basic fundamentals. Now comes the fun part. We can start working with the lighting. Now, a new tool that's come into Luminar Neo very recently and is very powerful is the light depth tool. So if we crack this all the way up, let's go all the way up to 100 so we can really see what's going on. You can see in this right hand side there's a depiction of our image. So we've got the signal there, there's the loco, there's the steps. And as we move this forwards and backwards, you'll be able to see we can change in the image where the light is. So we're moving it to the back of the image, or the middle, or the front. Now I really like the idea of having this loco front illuminated. So we've got a little bit more darkness at the front and darkness in the rear. We've got some slight ghosting going on here, so let's just see what we can do. If we move the front back a bit, I would say to there. And I really do like what's going on with the lighting here in the background. So let's just see what I've got before and after. Okay, so we are getting some issues here with the signal. You can see we've got this halo effect and around the bottom here as well. So I'm not quite sure that this tool is going to do the job for us on this particular occasion, but that's okay. What I might do then in that case is see if we can get rid of the tool, the effect in this forward part of the image, just to see if we can get rid of that ghosting on the signal, because I do like what it's doing everywhere else in the image, but just not quite on that part. So masking is a very, very, very important part of using Luminar. You've got all kinds of different masks. The brush does what you can see here, where you can either add some effect back in, so where it's red, let's just make that a little bit smaller. So where the image is red, you can see as we paint over, it adds the effect back in. So as you can see, we've just got that little bit of haloing back in the signal there. We'll just get rid of that for now. So I'll be doing a lot of masking during our edit. You can adjust the size of the mask here, the brush, with the size slider. The softness basically is the feather. So this would just be a straight edge. This I tend to work at 100% because it makes it nice and subtle. The strength is the strength of the effect that you're pasting in. So if you've done some changing of some colors, for example, you can choose to just layer it in gradually, or if you're really happy with what you've got, you can just crank it up and put it all in one go. It will become more obvious the more we do. You've got different types of masks. You've got brush, linear gradient, radial gradient, color, luminosity, mask AI, which means you can select particular objects, and object select as well. Basically object select means, oh, okay, I could probably click those steps and it would highlight the steps, which saves you from having to try and do it all, immaculately with the brush, because that would be very difficult. But anyway, fundamentally what we've got here is the nice bit of darkness in the background there, and then the nice light over the loco. I still want to darken around this area of the image, so we've got a lot of empty space here, so I don't want people's eyes particularly getting lost in there. So the way we're going to do that is with a bit of develop tool. Now what we're going to do here is just crank the exposure down, which as you can see is currently affecting the entire image, but I'm just looking now in the front portion of our image here, just seeing the effect that we're getting around here. Now I think that is probably about the darkness I'm looking for. So as I say, we don't want that over the entire image, we only want it over this section here on the left and the bottom section down here, just so our viewer's eye is not distracted. We're going to layer this in 100% softness, 100% strength. I think we really want quite a big brush here. Let's go even bigger than that. Right, so we're now going to pop this effect in. So you see we're going to go down the left hand side, which is what we wanted, and I'm going to sweep across the foreground here. And if we sweep across here, you'll see when I let go, now we have our darkened foreground without the ghosting around the signal and the control box here. So if I take what I've just done off, you can see it's light, and now we've just darkened it down. So that way our viewer's eye is now really looking at this lovely locomotive, which is exactly what we want. So with that being done, I think we're getting our viewer's eye into the right sort of area. I think I really want to try and make this loco pop even just a bit more. Now a good way of doing that is with the structure AI, which brings out the details. You can see here, if you look at the ballast, the more I jack it up, the sharper everything becomes. So if I turn that off and back on again, you can see it really does sharpen things up. Now what I want is only to apply that to the locomotive. So if we go to our mask AI, and it's now just going to analyze the image to see what it can see, and it might come up with transport. So if we select that, we'll see how well it does on the mask there. It's not too bad. We may need to just tidy that up manually. So you see we've selected erase, and where there's this redness, we're just going to just get rid of that. And again, I don't want it over the wagons, I just want it over the locomotive. So we're just using our brush to clean up this mask, so we just get it on the locomotive just to help it pop, help it stand out. So now if we go before and after, you can see we just brought out the details there, really making the locomotive stand out, just to make it pop. We could try a little bit of magic light with our headlight here, just to give some extra dimension, extra interest into the image. Let's see, what have we got? We'll select a light right here. There we go. And as you can see, we've now got these this flaring coming from the headlight. So if we just get the intensity on that to where we want it, size is fairly obvious. You can see it's just the overall size of the effect. Beam, I think we want number of beams. I think we want something a little bit more interesting than that. There we go. See that it's disappearing into the yellow of the locomotive there, but you can really see it down the bottom. And rotation, let's see if we can find an orientation that we perhaps like a little bit more. Let's go with that. I think that looks pretty good. So if we close that up and now have a look, you can see we've got a nice bit of flare of light coming off of the headlight. Now this green is still a little bit too distracting for my liking, So I think what we're going to do is sort that out. So if we come up to color, this is hue, saturation and luminance. What we've got at the moment is a little bit too much saturation of the green in the background there. So we'll come into the saturation and we'll just move this slider down, and you can see in the background, if I move all the way down, you can see how it's just talking into the green pixels there. So I think around about there is probably right. So now you can see, after I've mentioned it, see how that green was just overpowering and distracting. We don't want that. See, with that, it's now not distracting anywhere near as much, so our eyes again concentrated more on this locomotive. However, I would quite like my sun's jumper to be not affected by that, so I'll just erase the effect just over here where my sun is, and then we can, there we go, okay, his jumper back, just so we can get a little bit more green in there. Right, now we've got all kinds of colours and tones going on at the moment. A really great way of tying all that in together is to use what's known as a lookup table, or a LUT for short. I've got some custom LUTs on here, which I got from Dennis Barbarous. If I can find them, I'll link it in the description as well. But there's all kinds of LUTs in here that come with Luminar, so you can use all sorts. There's so many to get carried away with, but what they do is effectively add an overall tone to your image. So you can see that that's just selected the Alps LUT. We go down to Breas or Dark Forest, and you can see each one has its own individual impact on the image. It's basically like taking a airbrush to a scene and just lightly misting it all in one color, just to get the tone of everything together. Now I quite like what's going on with Tracime here. I don't often use that one because it can actually be a bit overpowering. However, in this instance, I really do quite like what that was doing. It's got that real sort of classic look to it. Let's just perhaps desaturate it slightly, because we're getting a little bit too much on the brown spectrum there. Contrast, let's just have a play around with the contrast and see what we like. Yeah, I like boosting in a bit of the contrast there as well. And then the overall amount, you can see, really does talk into the shadows. Actually, it's quite easy with these ones to darken it down just a little bit too much. We'll just keep moving this slider around, which is the best technique with this really. So you can go all the way from 100, which is whoa no, to absolutely nothing at all, and just keep moving it around until you think you find the sweet spot with exactly what you want to do. And now, can you see before and after? We've now just given it that overall warmer tone with this lookup table, which is just talking into the image and just tying everything together. So before and after, and I do really like that, and you can see it's really making this logo pop out now. Looking at it, I'm now finding this top right hand corner a little bit distracting. So what we'll do is the same trick again. We'll go into the develop and we'll look for a -1 again, I think. Masking, brush, I'm sure you're starting to follow along now. And we just want to distract the eye from up here. So we're just going to add in a little bit of darkening the image just at the top here. Just subtly, just to really get our eye focused in on this locomotive where we want everybody to be looking. I feel like the yellow in the handrails now is just distracting a little bit too much. So what I'm going to do is go back into the color tab. I might actually try playing with the luminance, which is basically how bright they are, but you can see that's not really what I'm looking for. So no, we'll go to saturation. Let's just reset that. Saturation, and we'll just desaturate the yellow of the handles there. You can see it's also doing the front of the locomotive, but again, using our mask, we'll sort that out. I think you see there, it's just far too much. We'll bring it down to there, so you can see here before and after. Yeah, those handrails are really shouting, and we just don't want that. So let's again get our brush mask, and we'll paint it in. So we can now paint that over the handrails. So you can see the difference now between the two handrails. That one's really shouty and nasty, whereas this one, yeah, there we go. Now those aren't shouting at our eye quite as much. So looking at the image now, I have to be honest, pretty much what my mind's eye had in mind to begin with. We've got that dark foreground here and the dark background, and then we've got the locomotive popping here with nothing else, just trying to distract our eye from what we're trying to be doing. No, I think this is looking pretty good, to be honest. Let's go down to the creative tab and see if there's anything else we might want to work with. Just going to have a look and see what the matte filter does for us, because that can give you a sort of, should we call it a retro film effect. Just wanted to see if a bit of that might add a little bit of je ne sais quoi to our image. It's kind of brightening those shadows up a bit. Don't think that's gonna do anything for us. It's always worth having just a little bit of play around at the end, just to see if there's anything that you might really be liking the look of. We've got dramatic, which is another one of my filters that I really enjoy. You can see that's obviously way too much, but it kind of feeds more into the black and white side of the spectrum. Just having a look to see if there's anything I like going on here. Maybe in the background, but again, no, I don't think it's needing any of that. Just have a little look at some mystical, which is again another lovely filter, which gives things that sort of ethereal look. Just perhaps a little subtle bit of that, maybe everywhere but the locomotive, just to soften things down, especially in the foreground where you can see we've got all of this ballast here. You can see the mystical really does soften that off quite a lot, which I'm quite enjoying, and I quite like the look that's giving on the gates as well. So if we go into our mask again, brush, paint, and I'm gonna feed this in all around the foreground here, over the ballast. I didn't quite like what it was doing with the steps, but I did like what it was doing with the gate. So I'm just gonna see if I can very subtly just paint that in over the fence, I should say. Just trying to avoid the steps where possible. I just need a little bit in there. There we go. And you can see that's just making that fence just pop a bit, which I'm quite enjoying. And it's just very subtly toning down the ballast, just stopping your eye from getting caught up in it too much. With that, I think, let's just see if I want to play with the shadows in that just a little bit, just to darken down around the edges. You can see the impact it's having at the bottom of the image here. Okay, so now let's just do one final check of our image, and as you can see we've got some haloing up here on the catenary and also around the front of the locomotive. Now my guess is that's come in when we did the light depth edit. So if we go back into our edits and we scroll down to light depth and masking and brush, I want to erase it. Just where we're getting the ghosting issues, so just take it away here, just around the front there as well. Just on the top of the locomotive we were getting a bit of haloing, sorry, not ghosting, and we'll just cut that back in there as well. And now you can see we've got some nice crisp lines in there. But if we now go back to our tools page, and as you can see down here it says processing image, we've got some light back in the sky again that we don't want. So in order to fix that, we'll go back into our exposure, we'll drag it down, brush, and then a reasonably big brush, and we'll just pop some darkness back into the picture here, back into the image where we want it, just to try and blend it in. And now as you can see, if we go before and after, we've got that darkness back in again. I might just put a little bit down here just because that green was a little bit distracting, and there I think that looks really nice and crisp now. So we can close that down, and there you go, we have our final edit, and I think I'm really pleased with that. I hope you guys enjoyed following the process. I'll mention again, because it's quite a lot to take in, I know, Anthony Turnham. I'll link to his channel down below. If you want to learn more about Luminar Neo, he's the guy to watch. Honestly, absolutely wonderful. You'll learn a load from Anthony. He is a great guy. But yeah, here we are. You have your image that you can now upload to your social media. You can put it on Instagram or Facebook or anything else you want, and then really show off your layout to the best of its potential to the wider world. So with all that being said, let's go back to the studio. Well, I hope you enjoyed following my creative process there. I did go quite heavy-handed on that edit just to show you how far you can go. I mean, you can go much further, or you can tone it back, make things much more subtle. And I do want to emphasize again, you must use a raw photo. If you use a JPEG, it ain't gonna work. Right. A storm has descended upon Finsbury Green. Let's see how the Badger and the Tug can cope.
Running on rails.
Well, there you go. Quite a dramatic running on rails there. But now it's time for everybody's favourite. It is
Not so weekly. Weekly whistle.
Yes, the not so weekly whistle. And we start by revealing the answer to last episode. Right. It did have a little twang to it, but I felt at the end the engine note really gave it away. And the answer was... It was a class 37. Yes, a tractor. As I say, it was quite an interesting tone to that tone. But yeah, if you got it, congratulations, well done. And if you didn't, don't worry, because you're about to get another chance. So without further ado, let's listen to this episode's Not So Weekly Whistle. There you go. What could it be? If you have any ideas, even if you don't, pop your guesses down in the comments section below and we'll find out in the next episode if you were right. And don't feel any pressure. But yeah, I'd love to know what you think it is. Right, well, that's bringing us to a close on this episode of the Model Railway Photographer. If you could, please do share, comment, like, and hit that subscribe button, as well as the notification bell, so you can be notified of when my videos drop and then you don't miss any. It really is appreciated because that algorithm, it's a hungry beast and it really does appreciate it. That being said, I'll see you next time on the Model Railway Photographer. Cheers for now.